Our purpose at WE is to change the dismal statistics of our people, particularly Māori and Pacifica people. We do this through helping small and medium-sized businesses to thrive. Our businesses need our help. So many have felt the pressures of lockdown and are facing challenges that they've never faced before. Challenges that are impacting their livelihoods. That is why we're bringing you this series to share stories of the people behind our businesses, their successes, their failures, their challenges, and their triumphs.
If you are already in business, we hope you will be inspired. Perhaps someone will share one piece of gold that makes a difference in your business. If you've been thinking about starting a business, we hope that you will be motivated to start your own business venture.
We hope that by sharing these stories, we can help small businesses on the road to recovery all across New Zealand, Australia, and the Pacific.
So grab your cup of tea and whakarongo mai.
Kia ora te whānau nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to our cup of tea this evening. I'm really excited to bring John to you tonight. And I just sat down and went through all of the different businesses he's part of. And oh my gosh, I've like literally filled up my whole page. So I'm going to let him explain some of these to you. But just to give you a bit of an idea. So he's part of PolyX. He's the chair for the Samoa Business Network. He's got his own consulting firm, N5 Consulting. He's part of Building Compliance Training, 3Pack Limited, Pacific Deal Store Limited, Pacific Employment and Housing and Limited Trust. And yes, this man is a bit of a legend when it comes to business. So John, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's Arnold. Thanks for having me.
Now, okay, before we get into all of this, how do you fit all of this in?
Careful time management. Yeah, really. I've got a massive calendar online and in a manual one. And just make sure all the information is transferred over and I know what I'm doing every single hour of the day. And there's 24 hours of the day. So you just kind of go, well, okay, that's going to be a 20-hour day today or a 22-hour day. And just keep, and lots of good coffee.
Okay, so do you personally manually take from your online calendar into your like physical calendar? You do that yourself?
Yeah, it's I guess old school, but I like some of the tangible things. So I buy one of those full book diaries and just fill it in with everything, and and I've had to move to a full page diary because there's some other things overlapping, and I've got to write little notes. And so it's a tedious process, but it takes me about an hour to make sure the whole week is scheduled.
And so inside your calendar, do you even schedule things like lunch breaks, morning tea breaks, breakfast, everything?
Yeah, I do that, especially, and then I overlap it with my phone and just make sure that an alarm goes off and it just pesters me, because I can just sit on the laptop, open it up, and then just away I go. Next thing I know, I'm going, oh crap, it's been about 10 hours now, and I'm going, oh, that's right, I'm exhausted because I haven't eaten anything. So really easy to go down the rabbit hole. So you got to make sure you got to take care of yourself, and even if it means scheduling lunch, breakfast, time to stop and take a walk. Like my alarm will pop up and say, get up and walk around, just to make sure I do it.
That's really important. I think people don't use their calendars well enough, and we have people that talk about poor time management. But if you scheduled stuff in your calendar and you stuck to it and included those things like getting out for a walk or doing your health and well-being, which we will talk to you about soon too, then it means that you can be on top of the things that you need to do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So, and what about, how about when you have like a big task to do? So let's say you've got a big report or to do, or something like that, and you know that that's probably going to take you, I mean, I'm just going to throw numbers out there. Let's say it's going to take you 5 or so hours to do. And over the week, you might not have 5 hours in one block of one chunk. So what do you do to manage that time, the time expectations and when it's due and what that looks like in your calendar?
Yeah, one of the key things I found in business in my journey was like, I'm only one person and I can only do so much. And just sharing the workload, it has been phenomenal for me. So being able to just call friends and go, hey, look, you're a specialist in this area. Do you mind if I outsource this work to you? And then here's some indicators that I need completed, and then come back to me and then offload that work. And I obviously do that prior to speaking with the client prior to going, hey, look, there's a wider team I work with. But being able to have that network of people to lean on and say, hey, can you help shoulder some of this or check my work on that kind of stuff, really helps decompress the calendar so I can do other things as well. So don't do it alone.
Okay, so we're not getting into any of that stuff yet, but I think this is really, really important. So outsourcing to other people, what do you have to have in place in terms of process systems, so that when you hand that on to somebody else, you know that they're going to do it in the way that you want it done, to the standard that you want it done, and you're not having to rework it yourself?
Yeah, so one of the key things when I'm outsourcing work is really finding other consultants or other business people that are operating in similar fashion in terms of the quality of work. And then what I do is work on joint projects together, and I'll work about 3 or 4 joint projects together. It's just so that we have an understanding of how I work, as the lead on it, and they can see how it's all constructed. And once we've had that relationship and it's guided, I'll toss out a couple of smaller projects that I know only be an hour, and they're happy to take that kind of work on it. And so that's very key. So finding those people that that work along it, working with them on a few projects leading, and then giving them a few kind of pilot projects to work on. And once you see that the work is actually there and you trust that their quality work is going to be in, then being able to outsource larger projects then becomes a no-brainer and is a real lifesaver.
Yeah, I think those are some really great points. Okay, so you're part of lots of different entities, and I know as a business owner, time, like you were saying, time is short, and you've got to have good time management. But how do you decide what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to?
Yeah, so I think that for me, when I'm looking at the tasks that I need to do for the various businesses, I look at what my skill sets are for that particular business, and stay in that lane as much as possible. And anything outside of that, if I can't take it on, yes, but primarily I'll say, look, that's not my area in terms of what I'm doing for the business. So you guys are going to have to shoulder that particular task, because as much as I'd like to be across everything, it's not healthy either, because you can only think about so many tasks at a time. So it's really just understanding and just accepting that I'm in the business and this is my role in the business. And so if I stay in that lane, I'm able to add value and be more productive in that space versus spreading myself too thin in that space. And I think for my fellow my colleagues that are in the other businesses, it helps them understand as well before approaching me, going, oh, actually, John's not responsible for that stuff. So let's direct that workload somewhere else. So yeah.
I think that's a really good way to approach it. Stay in your lane. And I think also when you go outside of your lane, because it's not really aligned, takes you longer to do some of those things because you're not 100% sure. So you got to do some research, which just takes up more time. So it makes perfect sense to just know what you're really good at, what it is that you want to be doing, and stick to that.
Absolutely.
No, that's cool. So, okay, so before you got into business, who was John? Like, what were you doing before all of this?
I would say that I was probably always kind of a young natural entrepreneur. If you can tell by the accent, I didn't grow up in New Zealand my entire life. I left when I was about 7 years old into Los Angeles, and then living in a space like that in the 80s, quite a culture shock. And like most immigration stories, my parents went to chase the American dream after trying to make it here in New Zealand, and we moved a lot like young people. So I had to grow up pretty quickly as the second oldest in the family. And the oldest son in the family. I realized pretty early on in my journey that money was not a resource that we had a lot of, and I had to find ways to quickly try to help that out. So I remember watching a trash man or a homeless guy pushing a shopping cart one day, and he's pushing the shopping cart, and it was full, and he would go off somewhere to this random place, dump it, and then he'd come back and he'd have cash in his hand. And I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. So probably from about 10 years old, I was collecting cans and doing the newspaper runs and those kind of things to help out my family. But so that's, I think, from in terms of like who I was before, I've always kind of been thinking, how do I how do I make money, to help the family and drive all that. Before I came back to New Zealand, I was in the U.S. and I was in the law enforcement space and teaching space, particularly high school, and founded a military academy program, law enforcement for high school kids who want to go into that space after they left high school. So I was teaching for a few years in that space, and I own my own private security company. So I was always entrepreneuring really early on, straight out of high school, just straight into it, primarily because I had to with the financial situation my family was in, knowing that I've got to do something and try to make it, chase the American dream quickly to help alleviate some of the financial demands and pressures from my parents. So yeah, it's been a journey from the United States all the way, making it back here in New Zealand. And it's still going.
So coming back to New Zealand, what was the first business that you started when you landed here?
Yeah, what did it just know? I showed up and I thought, I've been doing the N5 consulting for a little bit, mostly in the strategy space, political strategy space. And I showed up here and I was like, ta-da, I'm here. Somebody hire me. And people just kind of looked at me like, who are you? What are you doing? Why do you sound like that? So I found it really difficult to really kind of get the consulting space, especially New Zealand being a smaller space. I thought I'll talk to political parties, I'll talk to government people and try to jump in there. But, there was a bit of a process there, especially being an outsider and a new person. So I ended up for about a good year working odd jobs. I was a personal trainer at a CrossFit gym in Manukau. And then I was peeling potatoes at Fresher Foods in East Tamaki, just trying to like make it, because I just thought, at some point I'm going to pick up a client that's going to want me to give them kind of strategy overview, as a consultant. So yeah, I was doing that for about a good year and a half. Really tough slog until I can establish myself. But I look back on those times and think, man, I was really healthy back then.
I think that's great. Like, it just shows pure resilience, and sometimes you've just got to do what you've got to do to get to where you want to be. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I showed up going, ta-da, I'm here. One of the lessons I remember from my grandfather, as he used to say to me, I can't say it in Samoan, my Samoan is not that great, but it translates to, it's always nice to be invited to come to the front. And I think coming from the United States, where we're just kind of like, hey, we're here, let's go, let's rock and roll, pick me up right now. We're here in New Zealand, everyone's like, bro, like, we're still trying to figure out the accent. Like, are you sure you're from LA? Because you got a twang. And it was really tough for me to it was really messing with me mentally. I was just like, why doesn't anyone want me? But, sitting with my granddad, and talking things out, I just said, look, you're new. What do you expect? And things are done differently here. So just remember, it's always nice to be invited to the front. Until then, get to work. And I was a bit bitter and sour about it, but I just listened to that and just thought, right, get to work. And eventually people come along and go, hey, do you want to come and help us with some of this? So it was there was a lot of back and forth. Do I go back to the States? Forget this place, I'm going. But I just thought, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm here. Let's do it. So yeah, resilience is key.
Yeah. And that's great advice from your granddad too, right? Just get to work. Yes, sir.
Right. When they're right, they're right.
Absolutely. So is there anything that has sort of made you think, oh, actually, I don't know that I want to get in business? Like, is there anything that's ever stopped you, or any boundaries to you getting into business at all?
Yeah, I think whether it be in the US or here, I do find there's some common denominators when you're thinking about, everyone starts with the idea, or even if it's the same idea, thinking I can do it better than what's currently delivered. But I think the primary thing, which surprised me as well, is that there was this voice in the back of my head that said, you can't do it. You know what I mean? You start playing in your mind going, oh, can I not? How long is it going to take? So you start talking yourself out of, pursuing opportunities and seeing whether or not you can drive things. And then eventually, as you walk by, somebody else starts something similar to it, and you're sitting there scratching, you're going, man, that was my idea. So there was a lot of toing and froing for me. Coming here to New Zealand, I was really, like I said, taken aback that there was, I had to really restart all over again. And I was wondering to myself, do I really want to go through this slog again, or should I, just go work for somebody else? And I just decided, no, actually, as much as I could find a really good job that I would be good at, I'd rather add value, to myself and my family. And the only way to do that really is to take control of it and step forward. So, yeah, I think self-doubt is a big obstacle, as well as worrying about what everyone else is going to say, and and wondering whether or not the support that's out there is really out there. So I think a lot of people get hung up on that versus just go, let's do it.
Mm. So this voice of self-doubt that pops up in the back of your head, what is it that you do to overcome it? Like, what tools do you have in place that help you when things like that happen?
So I remind myself about where I am today and where I was when I came back in 2011. And that, and I quite often will go back and look at old photos that come up online on Facebook, look at and just talk to the people that that are around me, when I have those days where I just don't know whether or not what I'm doing is going to be successful, or whether or not it's worth to keep pushing. And they remind me, and I have to remind myself, that I've come this far. Why stop now? And I guess, how do you measure success? How do you how do you measure success, really? And everyone's got a different measurement of success. So I quite often look back at my story, and I remind myself and tell myself, actually, you've done a phenomenal job. So keep pushing and keep going, because other people are telling me the same thing as well. So I look at that and think, yeah, I've got to. And then, I guess the normal things you tell yourself, like, why am I doing this? I mean, what's the why? I'm here not only to make to take a stab at making a sustainable, financial business and position, but to do it for family and kids and legacy and those kind of things. So, but every now and then it does creep up, so I just have to keep knocking it out when it does come.
I think it's really important to have, I know what I've kind of referred to in the past as like a chest, where you put all of the good stuff that you've done, all those positive things, and then when you need to, you like open it up and remind yourself of all of the great things that you've done. That'll help you to overcome that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about about the why. So what's your why, John? I'm keen to know.
Yeah, my why, probably similar to other people, but my two children, my parents, they sought the opportunity in New Zealand and in the US, so that we could have a better life. I think they've accomplished that. I'm really grateful for them. And, I look at my own two children. My daughter is 10, my son is 9. I look at them and think, yeah, I want to do the same. I want to provide them, the opportunities that I didn't have, growing up as well, or facilitated those opportunities just better than what I had. So that's my primary why. And I guess the second why is because no one else is delivering, some of these services like I can, and I think my ability to stay in business and deliver those things adds value to the industries that I'm associated with, and I hope to make a positive effect.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think a lot of people do have that as their why, don't they? Their children, their families, giving back to their parents, and Māori, we've come from rural to city, and our Pacifica brothers and sisters have come from the islands to New Zealand, to Aotearoa, looking for the land of milk and honey, more opportunities, usually for the tamariki, for their children, not always for themselves, but usually it's for their children, so that they can have better futures. And, it's great that we are able to give back, acknowledge that, and then give back in recognition of all of their hard work. So your life obviously has changed a lot since being in business, obviously more time with your children, even though you've got quite a full schedule. But how else has your life changed from being in business compared to being employed by somebody else?
For me, uniquely, my journey in the mainstream space has actually slingshot me back to the Pacific and Samoan space. So I was born in Samoa, November of '81, and then I think about May of '82 we came to New Zealand. So, and then from 1989 we moved from New Zealand to the United States. And so my entire, I guess, identity as a person has been superficial. Oh, I'm Samoan, but growing up away from our culture and whatnot, I haven't been submersed around it. And I've always had this thing at the back of my head telling me that at some point I'm going to go back and learn my culture and be a part of it and whatnot. And but I just didn't know how to do it. And so coming back to New Zealand, going in the mainstream space, I've just eventually kind of curved back towards our Pacific people, and I find that my life is enriched so much more in business now, working with our Samoan brothers and sisters and our Pacific people, because I find a lot of inspiration from them as well. And so very, very different, I suppose, from some of my other I guess friends who are in the mainstream space or are living in the United States. I would have never thought that my pathway through business would bring me closer to my culture and help I guess myself and my growth personally in my journey to reclaim my identity as being Samoan. So yeah, one of the big ticks for me.
That's a beautiful thing. So talking about your family, who I know have probably supported you along the way, are there other people in your life, I mean, you can include your family, that have been part of your journey, that have helped you on your journey and helped you to where you are today?
But yeah, definitely. So I guess my biggest cheerleader, is my fiance Amanda. If she, like her unwavering, belief in, the value I have and skill sets of my experience in life and being able to provide that to New Zealand I've been just phenomenal, especially on the days that I just, feel like I can't get out of bed or I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. So it's been, so she's been very key to that. My parents as well, I think at the back of my mind, sometimes you're just kind of like, do you really mean it or not? But because they're not in business themselves, but they're supporting it. But I suppose for me, really kind of doing well and being able to forge ahead is, mentors, industry mentors, and and linking up with those who've done it before or those who are in that journey themselves. Being able to be in that space has been very key to helping me kind of move forward with, my own personal development, skill set development, and understanding where my gaps are so I can, find a plan to move forward. And so that's, I think, some of the most influential people in my life have been, those senior to me who are in places of, whether they're in government or other entities who really kind of help prod me along.
How do you decide who a good mentor is? Like when you've chosen a mentor, what have you looked for in particular in that person to go, yeah, this is the person that I want to be working with?
Yeah, so for me, I suppose for me, it's I guess that it's that feeling you get, that genuine feeling you get when you're talking to them, that they're wholly invested in what you're talking about and what you're doing. So when I'm looking for new mentors to upskill me and whatnot, I want to find mentors that have been in business, longer than I have been and have maybe a similar journey through some of those tough challenges. I've, like many people, probably started their businesses with zero to no access to capital. And so I look for people who have been in that journey space and know how to walk through that space. I find that because that's more valuable, because when I hit those pitfalls, I know I can turn to that person and say, hey, look, I've hit this part and this obstacle. Are you able to help me and guide me through that part? So that's probably a lot more handier than maybe someone like Donald Trump who had everything handed to him. So definitely key, finding people that have been in business that are successful and have walked that journey is very key, but also that those individuals, I guess, are really wholly invested in paying attention to what you're doing. And I guess the final thing is that with their mentorship and me under their tutelage, will they add value, to me and my business going forward as well. So sometimes there's some really successful business people out there, and you think, man, they'd be great to mentor under. You go and listen to some of them talk, or you buy the book and you read it and you scratch your head thinking, that's stuff I already know. So I think it's really key to understand that, adding value to your journey, your business, and your skill set is also something you want reciprocated, during the relationship.
It's okay, and I'm just going to chuckle to myself that of all of these talks, no one's brought up politics yet. But I had to expect that from you. Oh no. You talked a little bit too about some of the obstacles that you face and having mentors to help you through them. So What are some of the obstacles that you've faced in business, and how have you overcome them?
So I'll use PolyX I'll use that as an example. So that's a tourism product and service that's available to to general public. Primarily, our target market was in New Zealand. One of the obstacles that we had found was a lot of enthusiasm for our product and our service that we wanted to provide, and that's where it ended. And we were really confused by that. That there's a lot of enthusiasm, and that enthusiasm came from government sectors that are supposed to be helping to guide your journey to ensure that you have a good solid footing to leap into some type of success, I suppose. And when we ran into all that enthusiasm, we mistook the enthusiasm for, I guess, their willingness to invest into our journey. And we found it really frustrating that we've got all these cheerleaders who saying yes, 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 that's great, go get it. We weren't actually paying attention that they actually meant for us to go get it versus we'll be here to help you out. So I think understanding, when you're looking for when you're looking for support and success, and you get all that cheerleading, that sometimes that's an obstacle in itself. And over the last year, that has been a real hard pill for us to swallow. That so many entities are out there supposed to be helping us. Ideally, one would think you talk to this entity and AT and Tourism New Zealand and whatnot, and they're all enthusiastic when you meet them, but then the enthusiasm, that's all you're getting. And so we couldn't figure out how to overcome the hurdle until we realized it was only enthusiasm. So we're going to have to just grind it and push it forward. So so I guess that confusion around that. But I think capital is a hard one as well. 90% of businesses die out in their first 3 years or first 5 years, and we were not wanting to be a part of those statistics. So we looked at some of the costs that are fixed to determine are those costs that we can absorb, and what are not fixed costs that, in order to figure out our business model. And luckily for us, especially during the COVID-19 environment, that we didn't have a lot of fixed costs that weighed us down like other tourism groups and operators that had to shut down over that break. And so being able to be flexible and agile, was really key. So originally when we thought, well, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we thought, man, this really sucks. But it actually turned out after the COVID-19 situation came that those were advantages that we weren't actually paying attention to. So we really kind of flipped it on its head. So, and I guess when everyone goes dark and quiet, quite often, sometimes you have to rely on help from other people, and they go dark and quiet on you, and you're kind of left out in the dark. You've got to make sure that you just keep forging forward. What I mean? If people have, I guess, not so much wasted your time, but didn't live up to the expectation in regards to whatever that they were hoping to help you with. So a lot of, I guess, real kind of, I guess, just hard discussions and honest discussions you have to have with yourself and your colleagues, so that way you understand where we're going, what we're doing, what I mean, and how to move forward.
Mm. Yeah, good points. And I think you're right, especially when you have a startup, you've got to be careful of your overhead costs. Some people see the bright lights in big city and think, yay, I'm in business now. I'm going to go buy the new car. I'm going to go get myself a shop front or an office, and have these massive overheads without having really looked at the budget, working out where the income's going to come from, and then get into trouble. And so, I think COVID has taught a lot of people about budgeting and excess, really. Yeah. So before we finish up for the evening, John, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners this evening?
I think the one takeaway that the couple of takeaways I want people to take back with them about tonight is, you're not alone. Don't do things alone. I think quite often when we get excited and we start with an idea and then a business, I think the natural reaction is to hold the cards to our chest pretty tightly because we're afraid someone's going to run off and do it better, or run off with your idea. When that's not the case a lot of times. And I'm in the space where a lot of people are doing maybe similar things, but I just remind myself, well, they're not doing what I'm doing. So for PolyX Limited, we would not be in the place that we are in now, to be flexible and agile, to respond to the COVID-19 environment had we had kept everything to ourselves. So, find some people to work with, find a network to support you, and keep moving forward. And then I guess the other thing too is time management. I get a very busy day, a 20-hour day, and one thing people find when you become your own business person and owner and operator is that you just think, great, I can work 20-hour days and whatnot. But if you don't have a structure to your day, you're going to find that you're going to work all sorts of wacky hours, and there's no structure to that. And then doing simple things like getting out of bed is going to be very difficult, because you're in your mind, you're telling yourself, oh, I did 20 hours today, so I can sleep in, versus actually you need to be up early in the morning because the other people you need to talk to, customers, investors, whatnot, they're not working on your time frame. So those are the two main things. Don't work alone, reach out for help, and keep a structured schedule. I know it's tough, but after 3 weeks, you'll build a rhythm and you'll figure out how you work, how you don't work.
That's great advice, and it's something that I'm working with my clients too, and my staff. It's just making sure that you keep to a schedule. And I also say, don't leave things in your head. So if you've got everything down in your calendar, you can sleep, because you can rest assured that everything that you need is right then and there for the morning, and you're not having to try to remember it in the night going, okay, don't forget that for when I wake up, because 100 times out of 100 you're going to not remember.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I keep a notepad still, and I take it with me. I've probably got 3 or 4 of them lying around. But I tell them, just write stuff down. A, it's good for your practicing writing, but B, you got to get all that stuff back, because then you're sitting there going, what was that? What was that? So you don't want to miss those opportunities. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it stops you from being present too, if you're sitting there in your head all of the time. Okay. Hello, John. That was such a productive conversation this evening. So many great tips for people. I know that even I'm going to take some of those tips too, and I use a book as well, which is a bit old school given technology, but I do love to write things down. So yeah, thank you once again, John, for your time, for your expertise, for sharing with us this evening.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, whānau. So tomorrow night we've got Stanley Henry from Attention Seeker with us. So catch us at 8 o'clock tomorrow night to see him. And John, once again, thank you so much for having a cup of tea with me.
Good night.
All right.